got it.
Okay, if everybody will take their seats, we'll get started.
It's okay.
All right, call the meeting to order. Start with roll call.
Commissioner Allen,
Present.
Commissioner Norwood,
Here.
Commissioner Siragusa,
Here.
Commissioner Roberts, here, Commissioner Stallings,
Here.
Commissioner Orr,
Here.
Mayor Pinkinen,
Here.
present.
Okay, item 2, invocation and flag salute. Invocation tonight will be by Commissioner Norwood, flag salute by Commissioner Zaragoza.
Everyone, please stand and bow your heads. Dear Heavenly Father, in the name of Jesus, Lord, we thank you for this day, for this is the day you've made, and you told us to rejoice and be glad in it. And Lord, we come to this meeting to learn how to govern and how to be able to meet the needs of the people. And Father, we ask in the name of Jesus that you would touch our president, that you would touch everyone in the government, from the federal to the state level to the local municipal levels. And God, we ask that you bring peace in this world and in the lives of your children. And Lord, we ask you in the name of Jesus to give us insight, give us knowledge and understanding on how to govern. And we thank you for all things. In Jesus' name we pray. Amen.
To the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
All right. Thanks, Commissioner Norwood, Commissioner Zaragoza. Item number 3, administration. Item 3.1, consider approval of a resolution amending the 2020-2021 Water Capital Improvement Fund budget by appropriating additional funds in the amount of $1 million to increase the 2020-2021 appropriated amount of Water Capital Improvement Department.
Yeah, Mayor, Jennifer, are you going to talk about this? This goes along with the Osage agreement. So if you're going to consider approval of the Osage Caw Lake agreement, this $1 million needs to be appropriated. And it's money that is in the overall $317.5 million budget. And Jennifer, did you want to speak about it specifically?
I don't have much more other than there will be a companion item in the EMA for the transfer, and nothing for CAW is budgeted in our original budget. So everything that we've done for CAW, we've had to do budget appropriations for.
Okay. Carol, did you have something? Okay. Okay. So looking for motion?
Move to approve.
Yes, sir.
Okay. A motion?
Second.
Motion and a second. Any other discussion? Okay. Call for the vote.
Commissioner Allen,
Aye.
Commissioner Norwood,
Aye.
Commissioner Siragusa,
Aye.
Commissioner Roberts, aye, Commissioner Stallings,
Aye.
Commissioner Orr,
Aye.
Mayor Pinkinen,
Aye.
motion carries.
Okay. Item 3.2. Approve the execution of a forbearance agreement entered into by the Osage Nation, the City of Enid, and the Enid Municipal Authority, and authorize payment in the amount of $1 million. Carol?
We have been negotiating for 4 years with the Osage Nation in an attempt to do a one-off or to keep there is a larger dispute between the state of Oklahoma and the Osage Nation about whose water is in the state of Oklahoma and who owns the water in the Illinois River and who owns the water in the Caw Lake. And so this is a forbearance agreement that allows our project to go forward and have the Osage position and the state of Oklahoma's position be unchanged by our project, and that our project would not be stopped by either the state of Oklahoma or the Osage Nation in federal court with injunctions and expensive litigation. And this is the result of that. And it leaves the bigger issues unresolved, and however those bigger issues are resolved, our project is fine. It won't be affected, and we can be safe in building the project out, constructing it, using the water. So this is a very good thing. And yes, $1 million is expensive, but we've been negotiating for 4 years, and it would be far more expensive to either try to undo the Caw Water project because we were told to do so by a federal court, or to have to attempt to win the bigger dispute, which has been going on for years and will probably continue to go on for years.
Okay.
Okay, you made a statement about the other issues that the state has we're not involved in with this contract that you came up with. In the future, they can't deny us water in the future if they have an issue or they settle something with the state, correct?
Because of this agreement.
Because of this agreement.
Yes.
Are there any other hurdles that we're going to have to, are there any other hurdles that we're going to have to hurdle over after this, or is this the main?
Well, I would say that this is probably the biggest hurdle we had. We've also had the hurdle of negotiating with the Corps of Engineers, which we've resolved. There are parcels that are still out that we will have, that we are in the process of condemning. Those are probably the biggest hurdles. And then, of course, just those are the biggest political and legal hurdles. Of course, the biggest hurdle is just getting the work done at, all that. But yeah, this is one of the biggest things that we were concerned about.
I move to approve.
Second.
Okay, motion and a second. Any other discussion? Seeing none, I'll call for the vote.
Commissioner Allen.
Aye.
Commissioner Norwood.
Aye.
Commissioner Siragusa.
Aye.
Commissioner Roberts. Aye. Commissioner Stallings.
Aye.
Commissioner Orr.
Aye.
Mayor Pinkinen.
Aye.
Motion carries.
Okay.
Mayor,
Yes.
I know 3.3 is the next item on our agenda. I would like to suggest maybe that we move to item 7 to convene as the Enid Economic Development Authority. There's some folks here to talk about the ERDA budget. Jennifer can talk about the rest of the EEDA budget. And then, so I would suggest we move down to 7, go to 12, and then come back to 3.3 and finish up with EMA.
Okay.
Flow better.
In the interest of everybody's time, that makes sense. If you don't have to sit here for the whole budget thing, then we'll try and be respectful for your time as well. So with that said, we're going to start with item number 7, adjourn to convene as the Enid Economic Development Authority. Item number 8, all trustees of the Enid Economic Development Authority special meeting are in attendance. Item number 9, Enid Economic Development Authority special meeting is now in session. Item 9.1, discuss and take action on the fiscal year 2021-2022 Enid Economic Development Authority financial plan.
Jennifer, do you want to go ahead and lead off with the slide? And then I know we've got Matt Parrish and Debbie Moore.
I think it would be easier that way.
Okay.
So Dana, if you can go to my slide to 24 on my slides.
I believe all of you have a set of the slides.
Yep.
So if you flip to page 24, you'll be the same place as the screen.
An EEDA in our budget book draft is on page 181. There we go. So this is just an overview of EEDA, which stands for Enid Economic Development Authority. And the reason it is in its own section is because it is an authority. So we talked about that a little bit last Monday night. The authorities have their own sections in the agenda and they follow different rules. They're actually called a financial plan and not a budget. So this is pretty simple. Looking at that, not much change from last year. We've had a balanced budget in EEDA for the last 5 years. Our next slide, we'll look at the revenue. This is the fund that we have our TIF payments, sales tax rebates, and our ERDA contract. This is just at our revenues. So there's not much difference at all from last year. Transfer from EMA provides the funding for the remaining expenditures, and it just went down a little bit because the ERDA contract went down by $3,000 and the debt totals went down just a little bit. Transfer from general fund pays the specific sales tax rebate agreements that are in place, and that will be shown on the expense slide. So here's our operations. So professional services, we have none. Sales tax rebates, there's no change since last year. Economic development is where we have our Enid Regional Development Alliance contract. And that is a slight decrease based on the request. And then our TIF payments is just based on the estimate and revenue received and will be paid out according to those agreements. We just have a total of 3,000 change in our total expenses.
So I'm going to jump in just a minute to maybe help explain EEDA, Enid Economic Development Authority. That is the trust authority that's been created a long, long time ago for the city to be able to better conduct economic development activity, because trust authorities can borrow money, they can enter into contracts and such. For the last 11 years or so, the city through EEDA and the city has worked very closely with the Enid Regional Development Alliance to conduct a lot of that economic development activity, although the city does some of that ourselves. And so and actually some of those things the city has to do, like the TIF agreements, the tax incremental finance deals. So the money you see on there is actually money from some previous tax increment districts that have been approved, such as the TP&L wind laydown farm project, the Roosevelt Apartments, which is an older one from 2008. And I think there's another one on there, ADM. And so that's where that money comes from. That money comes from ad valorem taxes, the incremental portion of that. So that's where that comes from. It comes to the city, and then the city pays it out to whoever was supposed to benefit. So for instance, TP&L, part of it goes to them, or most of it goes to them. Roosevelt Apartments, I think we're almost done with that one, but it still goes to certain people. So I'm just trying to give you a little more clarification, because I'm thinking that you might have some of these questions. Sales tax rebates, if those are done directly with the city, with part of our rebate as part of for instance, we typically do those around retail type things. We have some of those existing with the city now. Jennifer,
Enid Crossing.
yes, Enid Crossing, which is the old Homeland building that is now 3 different stores. I think TJ Maxx and a pet store and something else. Five Below. And so those agreements are long-term agreements. So therefore, that's why those are done through an economic development authority. And in any city that you go to, certainly of any size, they'll have their own. For instance, Edmond will have the Edmond Economic Development Authority. So anyway, I hope that gives you a little more clarity. If you have questions, please ask us because we'll try to answer. And I know ERDA is going to tell you about what they do with the money they receive and their efforts in just a moment.
Slide I have left is the debt, and we just have one left in EEDA, and it pays off in January of 2023.
Okay.
It's for the Academy Sports. There is an amortization schedule that shows this on our debt notes, and that is on page 146. Which that's where all of our debt schedule is, and we'll talk about that later. It's the very first item on the page. And it shows EEDA, and then everything below that is all in Enid Municipal Authority, which is the EMA. And seems like we'll end the night with EMA tonight.
Okay.
So I'm done with the EEDA. Ahead and up and give their presentation for you.
Debbie, did you have anything? Oh, okay, go ahead. Oh,
I think so, unless set it up for you and then you just have to.
Oh, okay. Which button?
Thank you, Mayor, Commissioners, City Manager, for allowing us to present highlights from ERDA's fiscal year 2021 and to share our goals for fiscal year 2022 today. So some of the highlights, we've got 56 total projects currently, of which 21 are active. That means that these are worked on weekly. Since July 1st, 2021, we've got 9 projects in the wind category. So this represents 174 projected jobs, $12,727,000 of capital investment. And this investment is in various industries that include retail, food and beverage, manufacturing, and transportation. As far as retail recruitment, we're working to improve the gaps in the area of retail in Enid. We've had some great leads in each of these categories, but then things slowed down due to COVID. We're beginning to see things pick back up, and we're starting to move again. The search for a buyer of the former Jeffco building continues, and progress is being made. There are several requests for proposals. We're actively marketing space in 2 industrial parks, the former Jeffco building, as well as downtown offices, depending on the prospect's needs. Over the past year, we have participated in training to improve our response and better understand how to market our assets. ERDA plays an important role in connecting companies to other resources such as USDA, Oklahoma Department of Commerce, and NODA. We are often an information source for business owners. We use state and federal dollars as much as possible, utilizing local dollars last. The blue box in the slide indicates for every $1 ERDA received from the City of Enid, we were able to turn it into $6.82 for economic development purposes. It's been a goal for ERDA to define the business growth programs that we offer. This slide is a culmination of 2 years' work. These defined programs will provide more certainty for us as we budget and for the businesses asking for assistance. The goal is higher paying jobs, business expansion, industry certification, and public infrastructure, along with support for small business startup costs. The Elevate Enid initiative started in February of 2020 with a visioning session just before the COVID-19 pandemic. Elevate Enid is made up of over 60 individuals participating between the 5 committees representing ERDA members, community leaders, city officials, and partners. A report out session was held in February of 2021. Continue to meet regularly as strategic planning continues. ERDA has a list of priorities for the next fiscal year. The Boomerang program is a recruitment campaign that focuses on targeting individuals originally from the greater Enid area or graduates of Enid Public Schools, Autry, NOC, NWOSU, and showcasing the opportunities available in Enid to encourage them to consider relocating back to the area. This program would help improve Enid's labor participation rate. This slide shows our budget request. Basically, we have a flat budget request before you, which has basically been the same for the past 9 years. This slide shows several thank you notes over the past year from businesses that we have helped in some way. Many of these are from small business support grants that we were able to provide through CARES funding. And that's pretty small to read up there, but I have one that I've highlighted. It's actually pretty small on here too, but this is from A.W. Brueggemann from Ann Thane. She writes, Lisa and her staff have been a tremendous resource for our company. A.W. Brueggemann. They are readily available and responsive to requests for resources, whether it be a referral, consultative, or for financial support. This past year, they were instrumental in providing grant money, which allowed us to replace a broken heating cooling system. ERDA has also assisted with admission fees for trade shows and training. Generally speaking, they are professional and generous with their time and energy. And I can also vouch for our company, PT, that we've relied on the expertise of Lisa Powell and her staff through these last couple of years, and we've found it very beneficial. And we've actually been a recipient of some of those funds for new equipment for one of our, that's basically helped us take care of our largest customer. So we feel like ERDA, the staff has done a great job, and looking forward to working with them in the future. Thank you again.
Okay.
If there's any questions, Debbie's here. She can help answer any down and dirty details. Thank you very much.
Okay. I think we're at item 9.1.
And number 10, unless there's any questions for
10, that's right. Yep.
EDA questions or ERDA questions.
Anybody have any other questions for ERDA? Okay, seeing none. Item 10, adjourn to convene as the Enid Public Transportation Authority. Item 11, all trustees of the Enid Public Transportation Authority special meeting are in attendance. Item number 11.1, discuss and take necessary action on fiscal year 2021 to 2022 Enid Public Transportation Authority Financial Plan.
Okay, we're moving on to Enid Public Transportation Authority, page 186 in your draft budget books. It's not going. Buttons aren't working. Okay. Said we're on page 186, and this is the overall view of EPTA. We're looking at adjusted budget projection for this year, where we think we're going to end the year, and where we proposed for FY22. So the blue line is the revenue, and the green is expenditures. So you can see they're fairly similar. Our proposed budget is somewhat increased because of the CARES funding that she has received. And there's approximately 300,000 of CARES funding in the revenue and in the expense side for spending. We have had a balanced budget in 19, 20, 21, and 22. And they've done very well in receiving grants. We actually received 9 buses in the last 3 years. 3 of them were in FY19 and 6 were in FY20. Now we'll look at revenues. So transit runs on very little regular revenue. They have grant revenue and then a transfer from the general fund. And the reason the grant revenue is high in our projection for FY22 is the 300,000 for CARES funding. So normal revenue for the transit, not much change at all, but the grant revenue definitely is where you can see that the CARES is showing. And then our transfer from general fund, it went down just a little bit, and it was more or less to make it an even number easier to carry out throughout the budget. So here we're looking at our expenses. The personnel is approximately the same as last year. There are a few increases estimated for employees in our next fiscal year. The current year is much lower due to turnover. That is one department that sees a lot of turnover and the turnaround time to actually fill the position. But their months were actually, there was a lot due to COVID, closed for several days. And so that is why the red number, which is what we're seeing ending for this fiscal year, is much lower than we budgeted. And everywhere else looks just about the same. Things were down just because they couldn't even work for those few months off and on earlier in the year. But you can see where our capital outlay shows that CARES money for the 300,000 that she will get to spend next year. And I believe Mary Beth was going to be here if you have any questions for her.
Jennifer?
See her. Yes, sir.
On the grants, it was a 122% increase on page 186.
Yes.
It's going from basically 282 to 626,000. Why is that such a big increase? What does that cover?
The 300,000 is the CARES money.
It's for what?
The CARES money that she received.
Okay.
That she will get based on spending. She gets as a reimbursement basis, and plus she has 2 grants that she actually receives. One is a 5311 grant, and then she has a revolving fund that are regular grants that she receives every year.
So most of the CARES grant money came from federal government or state government because of COVID-19. So it's funds we received to be able to function during the pandemic.
And they're one-time funds.
Yeah.
The normal funding source for this is the ODOT, Department of Transportation 5311 operating grant. See.
Okay, good. Any other questions on Public transportation? Okay, seeing none, we'll adjourn to reconvene as the Enid City Commission and then go back on the agenda
To 3.3.
to 3.3. Discuss and take necessary action on the fiscal year 2021, 2022 City of Enid budget. Okay.
First, this is the slide that we looked at last Monday night. This shows all of our funds for the budget. And tonight we will be discussing the 10 funds identified in blue: airport fund, golf fund, the 3 police funds in their group, which is special projects, 911, and then police, fire, EECCH, which is where we have our event center and Spectra Management Company, and our Enid Economic Development Authority, Enid Public Transportation Authority, which we already went through. We have all sections on tonight's agenda to allow flexibility for you to revisit any area of the budget draft. Have any questions? And motions could also be made at those times. You don't have to wait for the final night, which we are still looking at a tentative approval date for the 18th, which is the next Tuesday's meeting.
Okay.
First, we're going to start with airport. It's on page 92. And their fund usually looks approximately the same each year unless they have a capital outlay, a big project. Most of their projects would show actually in contractual services because that's where their grant money would show. This year, we're looking at the blue, which is the adjusted budget for this fiscal year. The red is our running projection, what we think we're going to end this year, and green, of course, is the FY22 proposed budget. So you can see the revenue looks great in red. And that is due to some early months this year. We had high jet sales from Vance earlier in the year. They actually had a runway closed down. Most of it was last year, but we had a few months that still affected our sales this year. And also reimbursements will be higher in excise tax refund. We only budgeted 130 and we actually received 180. Which was based on the sales from last fiscal year. They also received $69,000 in CARES funding that we didn't have budgeted, and that was due to COVID. And it was just an operating, any missing, what they saw as missing operating, and they were helping replenish that. So we're actually expecting another runway closing at Vance. We did not put any higher months in that because we were not sure when that runway closing would happen. I think the dates changed a few times. So we just kind of left it out because you don't want to budget something that's not going to be there. So that will be helping us a lot whenever that takes place. Normally we sell about 90 to 140,000 gallons a year on our government contract, which is our Jet A fuel sales for them. But when they have a runway closed, we actually sell almost 100,000 a month. So it's significantly different and very good for us at the airport. So our sales actually over the last few years, in 18, we sold 90,000 gallons for the whole year. 19, we sold 152,000 gallons. In 20, we sold 738,000 gallons. So that would be the increased excise tax refund that we received in this fiscal year. And so far, we're already at 203,000 in FY21. Not much change for personnel services. They did change a seasonal crew worker to a full-time airport technician, and that now gives them 6 airport technicians. Contractual services is based basically the same. This year's numbers are a little higher just due to some remaining terminal expenses that we had from FY20. And then maintenance and operations, that's where his cost of goods sold is. And you can see that the red is increased. So when we have high sales, which is very good, but it also increases our cost of purchasing that fuel. And it is possible that we may see a budget appropriation later this year to cover that and to cover his new project that they're getting ready to start. Capital outlay is basically the same. They have the one small crack seal project scheduled, and they have a ground power unit for starting planes. And that is what's in their capital outlay for next year. So current, but they do have a deficit budget planned, but they have the fund balance to cover it. They're ending with approximately $22 million fund balance.
Okay.
Okay. We'll look at golf. They're on page 98. Golf has had a balanced budget, 19 in FY20, FY21, and that's what we're projecting for next year. This is looking at revenues and expenditures for our adjusted budget and what we're projecting to end the year. And then, of course, our proposal for next year. And you can see he's doing very well with revenues this year. So we did put a little bit of increases in for next year, and we'll go over that on the next slide. So current year running projection based on revenues to expenses, we're projecting a surplus of 99,000. Revenues are higher by 111,000. So he's really done a good job, and golf looks great right now. Expenses are a little higher than original budget, which is rollover encumbrances, but compared to the adjusted budget, we're coming approximately 20,000 under. We'll look at revenues, and they do receive a transfer from general fund as a supplement, but overall revenues, we're budgeting slightly higher, approximately 38,000 higher, approximately 5%. Due to historical averages, we're increasing greens, memberships, carts, and pro shop sales. So that's why the green is just a little higher than the blue in the golf revenue. And the transfer from general fund, actually, we're projecting to go down 10,000 compared to this year. Now we'll look at expenses. So personnel, a slight increase for budget. This year, we're showing a decrease because of the difficulty hiring, but temporary personnel was used. So that expense is actually showing in another line on the running projection, professional services, which is in the contractual services group. And contractual services won't have an architect for next year. We had that budgeted for this year. And that is why the green is less than what we're showing for blue for this year. Our maintenance and operations were budgeted similar. Running projection is higher due to cost of goods sold coming in higher in the pro shop. So we did increase pro shop revenue, and it's showing because of the historical averages, and they're selling more. So, and also Spectra costs are higher. Spectra runs our snack bar at the golf course, and they have a cost of goods sold specifically for them, and their costs are running higher. So capital outlay, we have an increase just for the heavy duty utility vehicle he has requested for 28,000. But the fund balance is doing well, projected to be 715,000 at the end. And just like they were doing so well, we got to do a budget appropriation to let him buy that mower earlier last meeting.
So this would be the time where I could visit about the sand in the sand traps. out at the golf course. Is that right? I would like to, they've done very well out there. During the pandemic, we allowed people to continue to play golf because there was social distancing. And we've seen quite an increase in what's gone on out there. We have people coming in from all over the state to play at Meadowlake because it's a good golf course. However, it has sand traps, which enhance the game. Isn't that right, Mayor?
Don't know. I've never been in one, but.
So the problem is that at Meadowlake, the sand traps are in dire need of being rebuilt. And I just thought I'd throw out there that looks like over the next 2 years, if we spend another maybe $10,000, we could rebuild the sand traps that are there, and they would then they would last. Would you say another 10 or 15 years, Michael?
So if you just replace the sand, redo the drainage, don't put in. So if we put in a liner, there's some pretty high-end liners that keep the sand that would last about 20 years. They get pretty expensive. We only have 18 sand traps at the golf course, so it's about an acre worth of bunkers. It would cost us about $10,000 a year, or $10,000 over 2 years. We could do it in-house, and we're pretty much pulling the sand out, redoing the drainage, and then putting new sand in. The sand would last about 7 to 8 years. The problem is the sand, when we have heavy rain events, it washes the sand out. Then the clay that's underneath washes and gets mixed in with the sand, and then you get contaminated, and it eventually blocks the drain tiles. Your bunkers don't drain. You want everything to flow through. So it's really not a big expense. If we wanted to replace the sand in the bunkers, we could do half this year or in next fiscal year, half the next, and it would be about $10,000.
Yeah.
But Commissioner Allen is very right. We've been doing really well the last couple of years.
Yeah.
With the pandemic, even before the pandemic hit, our revenues were trending upward. Our membership's been up. We're kind of the home, really not the home, but we really feel like we're the home for Vance Air Force Base. We host probably 8 to 10 events. Anytime they want to have some outing, they contact us. We make it happen. We just had one last Thursday. We had 120 people out on National Golf Day, and they had a great time. We're the host facility for Enid High School, Pioneer, Enid Junior High. We hosted the 6A Girls Regional Golf Championships 2 weeks ago, which will be, last year we didn't host because they didn't have any golf tournaments, but would be our 7th year in a row to host the largest class in the state of Oklahoma's regional golf tournament, which is a pretty big feather in our cap, which says that we have a golf course that is a good layout, but also pretty well maintained. And that's thanks to the investment that you guys give us to help maintain.
Well, I might add that it's not lost on everyone that we had a ice storm and that it caused as much damage at the golf course, if not more so than anywhere else in town. And I have to commend you all for getting out there and getting after it and getting things cleaned up. I know it takes a long time, but I think you've done a remarkable job of cleaning all that debris up.
Well, thank you. I appreciate that. It'd be one time that'd be nice to be a links course with that many trees, but we're not that way.
Yeah, I agree with Commissioner Allen. If there's a way to upgrade those traps during the next couple of years, I'd like to try and figure out how to do that. I would like to say I get lots of feedback from people all day, every place I go. Not all of it's positive, but when they're talking about the golf course, it is all positive. It doesn't matter if it's from the base or people in the community. They very much appreciate what you guys are doing out there. So it's a great job.
Thank you. That's commending to my staff.
Mike, was that $10,000 per sand trap or
$10,000 total?
total?
Yes, sir.
Yeah, each year.
So we're looking at about 20,000 over 2 years, and that's why we would spread it out. If they're going to try to do it in-house, we could give them all the money and they still wouldn't get it done, so if we can do 10,000 and put that in the budget for next year, then we're home free for a while.
Yes.
Yeah. Okay.
Any other questions?
Thank you.
Okay. Thank you all.
Thank you.
So does that just happen? Have to vote on anything or?
If you want to vote on that, you can. I understand your intent is to add 10,000 to the golf budget, and I think we can certainly accommodate that if you want to vote on that.
Okay.
But I'm willing to. We'll make the change. I think.
Commissioner Allen, would you like?
Now it was 10,000 total?
No, 10,000
All of them, or 10,000 for half this year and 10,000 for half?
next year. Yeah.
So that would get you approximately 9 sand traps fixed this year and then 9 sand traps completed next year.
Okay,
1,000.
so I just wanted to make sure because we get in
Bet.
5,000 and then we're at 10,000 doubling, so.
You're looking at about $1,000 a sand trap is what easy math. Gerald told me never do math in public, so.
Okay. Commissioner Allen, did you want to make a motion?
Well, I would make a motion that over the next 2 years, we increase the golf fund by $10,000 each year to be used for renovation of the sand traps at Meadowlake Golf Course.
Okay. Do I have a second?
I second it.
Motion and a second. Any other discussion? Hearing none, I'll call for the vote.
Commissioner Allen,
Aye.
Commissioner Norwood,
Aye.
Commissioner Siragusa,
Aye.
Commissioner Roberts. Aye. Commissioner Stallings,
Aye.
Commissioner Orr,
Aye.
Mayor Pinkinen,
Aye.
motion carries.
Okay. Thank you.
Okay, we'll move on to our police group. Now, they have 3 funds in their group, and I'm going to go ahead and talk about all 3, and then I'll let, I believe Captain Skaggs is here to talk. So we're looking at page 86 for special projects. This is where the state and federal seizures monies go. And all of their receiving funding, and then when they set up to purchase anything is based on what funding is available to determine what purchases that they are going to make. They have a set amount in there, pretty much budgeted every year, just so that they don't have to come back to the commission every time they want to spend on something. So they just kind of have a round amount that we do budget in there, and they do have the fund balance projected to be approximately $377,000 at June 30 of 2021. So they have plenty to cover a deficit budget. And one item that they do have in there that will be in there for 5 years is the virtual shooting simulation equipment. That is for their new training center. And they pay that amount for 5 years, and OMAG will participate and refund them, reimburse them $80,000.
Okay.
And we did have that budgeted in the FY21 budget, but it has not got purchased since the training facility had not been built yet. Now we'll look at 911 on page 122. So the revenue is coming in lower in landlines, which has been a trend over the last several years. They did finally do a new fee at the state level for mobile, but the mobile wasn't near the amount that the landlines were originally. So they're still low on their funding. And so we did have to increase the transfer from police and fire to cover the deficit. So you can see the red, which is our current projection for this year for revenue, is lower than what we budgeted. We do have a higher revenue for next fiscal year, but that is just because we increased the transfer because they do have a small amount of capital outlay that will need to be covered. So personnel is a slight increase, and that's just because we have some small increases budgeted across the board. And they did do a reorganization, but the reorganization should balance out a little bit. They took supervisor and made a manager, and then they took another supervisor to make another call taker. Contractual is 77,000 higher. That was due to the AT&T amount that we pay each month. They did a change about 2 years ago, and we had a very large credit that was used up, but it was used up in February or March of last year, right when it's time for us to do numbers for budgeting. And so it did not get raised fast enough to get into the budget, but we definitely have it in there for next year. The M&O maintenance and operations section is a little bit different. It was a one-time purchase that we budgeted for this year. And then capital outlays are $38,000 for tower reconfiguration and then the computer hardware for position 6. Part of the position 6 that they had budgeted for this fiscal year, this is the remaining that they need for that position. Fund balance is projected to be $148,000 to start the new year. And so we'll have to figure out for future years on a funding solution. As of right now, it's just been increasing the transfer from police and fire. So we'll move on to police on page 128. So the police fund, it's budgeted pretty much the same each year. The only thing that changes mostly is their capital outlay. You can see the revenue are approximately coming in exactly what we budgeted. And I will say the transfer number we did make a change. So the transfer number is a little higher than what is showing in the budget book. So when we bring you a final draft, that number will also be changed. Comparison to FY21 to FY22, we're budgeting approximately the same. Personnel is budgeted based on their second year of a union agreement for their CBA. For fraternal order police, contractual, there was a revenue budgeted for a grant that was to replace GIS software. And it was paid by grant. But anyways, it was budgeted in FY21 and that will not be in there next year, the expense or the revenue. And the maintenance operations is affected by the transfer to 911. And then the capital outlay shows the reason the blue and the red are so much higher. That's what we did the budget appropriation for their building this year. So normally it'd be around the green area, which is approximately 750,000 each year. And that's where they buy their vehicles and iPads and tablets for their vehicles, and also vehicles for animal welfare and for their building maintenance. Those are the other two things that they have for this year, but usually it's around the amount of the green, but they have their $1 million that we just did the budget appropriation earlier this year for their training center. So they have a deficit budget for next year, but they do have the fund balance to cover.
Okay.
If Captain Skaggs wants to come up and say anything. And operational questions, he'll be the one to answer those if you have any questions.
Good evening.
Evening.
Any questions I can answer for you?
I know the police department's low on manning, quite low on manning. So personnel services, is that where manpower comes in, or is that under revenue?
Personnel services, we are funded 100%. I will tell you that we are 25 short right now. We have 9 in the pipeline to be hired this month. And we hope for another 8 or 9 the following month. So we're hoping to see those numbers come back to normal over this next year. That's why we're funded at 100% for personnel.
Okay.
That was my question. Thank you.
Okay.
You got to ask about the training center.
Yes, how's the training center coming along?
Training center's coming along. The rain kind of stalled us. We were supposed to have concrete laid this week. The footings are poured, the gravel's in. Once they get the concrete poured, we should start seeing walls come up within the next few weeks.
Great.
Good.
Captain, will that training center will be open to the public, or is it just specifically for the?
So what our goal is, initially, it'll be open for our police officers for training. As our program expands, what we want to do is open it to the public, bring churches in. You know, they have their, you got to call them safety teams now. Businesses. The really cool thing about this Virtual system that we're purchasing, it gives us the ability to go into a business or a church, a school, and use your cell phone to record the area. And we can actually upload that into the system. So it becomes a true scenario for the people we're assisting. The second part of what we want to do for the citizens of the community with the sale of firearms being up 40 to 50% is bring them into a controlled environment and actually teach them shooting scenarios. And they're not having to use live ammo. So yes, we're going to extend it out to the public. You won't see that initially, but over time we'll put that into place as our manpower gets up and we get somebody running the facility full time.
What about like the public school system with, you know, teachers?
We're just in the planning stages now. I don't think anything's off the table. If that's a need that they have, I fully expect we'll be able to accommodate that. And we want this to be a public endeavor and support the community any way we can with this facility.
So will we get a tour of it?
Absolutely. I'm sure you guys will be the first ones in.
How many classes a year do you think you're going to be sending through?
It depends how.
Is it for continuing training, but actual classes?
Are you talking about police academies or are you talking about citizens? Probably 2 per year. It's a long course. It takes a lot of instructors. All of our instructors are in-house. With the exception of right now, we do our self-defense. We have to bring somebody in because we don't have an instructor. But most of that is done within our own police officers. So that's very time consuming. It takes away from our officers being on the street. So right now the plan is 2 a year. As time goes and things change, hopefully that will change as well.
Okay.
I might add, because sometimes this is watched in the future, that the police academy that you all provide, a couple of times a year still?
Right now, one.
Yeah. It's, I went through it several years ago and thoroughly enjoyed it.
Now we're talking about 2 different things.
Yeah,
we have the Citizens Police Academy, which we do, we did it twice a year up until 2020. And then we also actually, we're housing a police academy for police officers.
Right.
It started out just for our department. And now this next academy, we will have officers from other departments coming in to go through their police academy here in Enid.
One I was speaking of is where you signed up as a regular citizen and then over a several week period were immersed in virtually every aspect of the police department by the experts in each field. And I found it fascinating.
I would encourage all of you, of course, you're already experienced, but the rest of you, if you get an opportunity to come through our Citizens Police Academy, please do. You will learn, like Jerry said, and Commissioner said, every aspect of our department, from our department. We don't use anything, YouTube. It's all actual incidents that take place here in Enid. So we try to bring our police department home to our citizens and really let them know what we do.
When will you be starting the next one? You have any idea?
We had an academy started when COVID set in. And what we'd like to do is finish their academy and then start a new one. So hopefully we're looking at that within the next few months.
Hey, don't forget me.
I won't forget you.
I sign up now. So.
Okay.
Captain Skaggs.
Yes, sir.
Just got a question. We were talking about how we're down at 75 officers.
Yes.
How is the call volume?
Call volumes
to last
it stays
year
pretty
and the year
consistent.
before?
Our guys are busy. We're mostly reactive. We don't have a lot of time to be proactive. Of course, our traffic division would be the most proactive you'd see. But as our numbers come up, we'll get back to, more proactive activities. But right now, we're mostly reactive.
So basically what you're saying is for the last year or so, our department's been tackling the same amount of calls each year
Absolutely.
with 25 less officers.
That is correct.
They're doing a hell of a job.
They're working a lot of overtime. That doesn't mention our events, our extra security we're working. So, our guys are putting out a solid effort and picking up the task. I will say that with what's going on in the national narrative, we are starting to see police officers from larger departments wanting to come to smaller departments. Out of this 8, we have 3 that are certified. So a lot of laws are changing through United States. So a lot of officers are looking for smaller departments to come to, and they're looking at Enid. So hopefully that will benefit us and help bring our numbers back up.
Being one of the first officers here in the state of Oklahoma to receive reciprocity testing, hopefully we can snag some of those people from out of state that are
We're not opposed to stealing from other departments. Absolutely. Thank you.
Right. Captain, could you tell me a little bit about what the department does in the Enid Public Schools? Do we provide the police, or do they subsidize, does Enid Public Schools subsidize any of that? How many officers are involved in that? I know they have a satellite office at Enid High School. How do we cover all that?
So actually, they are their own police department. They hire their own personnel. They staff it. They basically do the same reports that we do, but they're their own police department.
I did not know that. Thank you.
Yes.
Okay. Any other questions? Thanks, Captain Skaggs. You
Thank
guys
you.
are doing a great job. Appreciate
Thank
it.
Move to Event Center Fund, page 134 in the draft budget. Two main components make up the revenue in our EECCH is what we call it. It would be the Enid Event Center and Convention Hall. So we just call it Event Center for short. But the 2 main components for our revenue is hotel tax and our Spectra contract. Hotel motel tax has been, we did budget it the same. It's coming in a little lower on projections, but April actually is finally showing a slight uptick that's more in line with our historical numbers. We had 98,000 received in April and around 102, 103 in the past years prior to this year for COVID reasons. So we have an increase in our Spectra rentals, which Kevin will discuss more of that. And also a reminder, when our hotel motel tax is down, that's when we have to increase our transfer to the fund for Spectra to be able to operate. So our hotel motel tax has been approximately around 1.4 for many years. In 17, it was 1.4. 18, we moved it to 1.35. And it was lowered to 1.2 a couple of years ago. So you can see our running projections are pretty low for this year, but I think a lot of that is getting ready to turn up. So our expenses are contractual. We have an increase. ECVB is back up to what was funded before based on request. We upped them a 75,000 back to what they were before last year. And we increased a slight increase for the Spectra incentive. Our maintenance and operations increase is based on Spectra's projection for increased rental revenue, which also increases their expenses to run those rentals. Capital outlay is just a slight decrease on balancing the budget. So hotel tax is by the vote of the people, just in case we're thinking. And we have ordinance number 2002-17 is where that is at. So it's an 8% tax. It's split between the city at 5% and the county at 3%. This shows the calculation for how they go about getting budgeted and how much money we have to send to Spectra. Kevin actually has the history of Spectra, and also he'll talk about the Visit Enid history with his slides. So this shows, though, the supplementation, 419,960, but it's actual cash sent of 400,000, if you can see above. So we start with the hotel tax, and then we have to remove out what we have to send to county. That leaves the 750,000. We can add in the interest. And then these are other expenses that we have. And that leaves us a negative 30,000. So we don't have any hotel tax left after that calculation to supplement operating the event center.
I have a question. I see where the 8% is split between the city and the county, which is these 5% after it's been split to 8%.
Yes.
3% to the county and 5% to the city. And when we first started the budget, I was really surprised. I didn't know this until last week, that Oklahoma is the only state in the United States that doesn't share the ad valorem taxes with the cities. It's all county. Why is that?
I think that's just, you've heard the phrase, that's just the way it's always been. That's the way it was set up at one time, that Oklahoma municipalities run on a sales tax model. And so I think some of those talking points talked about sales tax fluctuates, as we see, up and down. So therefore, that's more fluctuation. So I don't have a good answer for that. I do know that it is raised to our legislators every year, but I also know it's very tough for them probably to figure out and get support at the state level to change that, because to get more money from municipalities at the state level, you'd have to take it away from somebody. And that's a tough thing to do. So I really don't, it's just been that way apparently from, I guess, statehood or whenever a sales tax was implemented. Commissioner.
And I noticed the part of the effect of it. I mean, for us as citizens, the positive side of it is our property taxes are lower. I get that states that do share them, or, a lot of the ad valorem taxes that are given to the cities and municipalities, their property taxes are higher. I realize that, but I was just wondering, because we're only one out of 50 states. Thanks, Joe.
So unless you have another question for me, we'll have Evan Brisky, the Stride Bank Center General Manager, come up and talk about.
Okay, Kevin.
Commissioners, Mayor, City Manager, I appreciate you giving me the time today to speak a little bit about the Stride Bank Center budget and the Visit Enid budget. First, since we have some new commissioners, wanted to talk a little about Spectra and who we are. So we were hired by the City of Enid to manage the Stride Bank Center and oversee Visit Enid. We're a company that manages well over 120, 130 venues throughout America, Canada, and actually worldwide. And we handle venue management. We also do food and beverage, hospitality, and partnerships. And you receive all these services from us here at the Stride Bank Center. Part of our goals at the Stride Bank Center, I have them listed here. one of them, raise the quality of life for people here in Enid and Garfield County, help make Enid a destination city, attract strategic, regional, local, and statewide events, also to help grow downtown and to bring an additional sales tax and hotel tax since we are funded through the hotel tax. This just talks a little bit. This is a survey done by Young Strategies about different travel parties that come to Enid. You look at all of them and about how many are in their travel group and then what they usually spend when they're here. Just an interesting and good breakdown of, you know, what people are spending when they're coming into town and for what. And this just kind of is how we kind of judge who we're going after and where the different revenues are coming from outside of Garfield County when people are coming into town. And how we track some of this, at least at the Stride Bank Center. So zip code reporting, all our ticketed events, people have to enter their zip codes. So we're able to track where they're coming for certain concerts and certain ticketed shows. We know that based off this zip code tracking, 16% of patrons from ticketed events are outside this area. That's outside of a 50-mile radius. We have a conservative estimate of 20% of patrons for non-ticketed events are from outside the area. That is going to only increase now with the Glow opening next door and having that opportunity to host a lot more major conferences. And this is an older number, but we estimate that about $1.3 million in revenue is generated off guests visiting Enid because of the Stride Bank Center and our events. And that's whether they're shopping in our stores, eating in our restaurants, or staying in our hotels. So just a little bit about where we are right now. We'll take a look at where our current update is. Obviously, we've been impacted significantly by COVID. So this graph here shows the 9 recognized months plus 3 projected months to finish out the fiscal year. So the great news is we're projected to have 466 events this year. That will, I guess, shatter the record of how many events we've ever held here at the Stride Bank Center. The tough part about that is the larger events, the ones that generate the more revenue, have gone away this year. The concerts, the major conferences, things like that. We have picked up a lot of meetings. Rotary now hosts their meetings here. Noon Ambucks host their meetings here. So while those are a lot of meetings, we do offer them significantly discounted pricing because we want to get the civic groups meeting here and really appreciate everything they do. So we do work with them on pricing. So while those number of events have increased, the revenues have not increased at the same amount. So you look at our event operating income, it's just under $300,000 right now, which is down from pre-COVID, and you'll see what we're budgeting for FY22, the difference there. And then you look at our personnel and operating expenses, that's just under 1.2 million. So that is down fairly significantly as well from what we budgeted. Obviously with less events and less people in the building, we're able to cut back on not just building supplies, but on staffing, and had to make some adjustments there. And then our other income, which comes directly from sponsorship revenue, is just under 300,000. So right now, as you saw on that first slide, we had projected going into this as if COVID wasn't going to affect us, and that put us at a $419,000 deficit. Well, after the first handful of slow months because of COVID and still experiencing some of that, we're projecting a deficit of $575,000 for this year. For FY22, we're expecting to go up another about 10 to 15 events and have around 477 events. Here at Convention Hall, this is where the majority of our events take place. 396 are what we're projecting. And as you can see, a majority of them are meetings and banquets. That's what makes up almost 80 to 90% of what we host here in Convention Hall. And those are event days. So for example, if we have a convention that's 3 days, that counts as 3 events as they're here for 3 days. So you can see meetings are still a big part of what we have here between Rotary, AM Ambucks, Noon Ambucks, Kiwanis, Realtors. There's a lot of people who meet here on a either weekly or bi-weekly basis and have a lot of meetings here in this facility. On the event center side, 78 events. And as you can see, about half of those are going to be sporting events. We've really had the opportunity to grow what we do sporting wise. We do a lot of high school events. We host a lot of statewide tournaments. We're picking up more every year. We've added dual state wrestling the last couple of years. And then another big part of that is we've added the Enid Outlaws, which has been a great addition to our facility, and excited to work with Jonathan and his team to keep increasing that. And I think what we don't even have factored in here is I hope I don't jinx some playoff games that are going to be starting in July. So that'll be nice, a good way to kick off the first month of the fiscal year. You can see also in there, we have some banquets that take place on the event center side. Concerts is the next big piece. And I think this year, because of what we are seeing right now with the middle part of the country opening sooner, it's going to result in more national touring shows coming to Enid, Oklahoma than we've seen in previous years. So in previous years, when we've averaged maybe one a month, I think we're going to see closer to 2 a month coming, at least between now and April. And we already have 10 announced events right now. And I think there's going to be a lot more to come because we are open and don't have any restrictions. And that's what a lot of these artists and touring events are looking for right now. So it gives us an advantage, at least in the next 6 to 8 months, on getting some bigger touring acts. So that's what we see there. So a couple other details on our budget for FY22. So our direct event revenue is going to be about just under $700,000. Our ancillary revenue will be just under $1 million for about $1.7 million in gross event operating revenue. Our expenses will be just under $1 million, so that in our event operating income, the net number will be about $730,000. Our other income we expect to increase, obviously, with the building closed for a little bit. Sponsorships were down. We expect that to go back up to more of a normal number to give us a net operating income of just over $1 million. And then our indirect expenses will go up a little bit because of all the additional events and people in the facility to just under 1.5. And that's how we get to the proposed subsidy of just under $420,000. If we look at this chart here, so since the event center opened back in FY13, the operating expense for the facility was just under $800,000. Proud to say that until COVID hit, we had decreased the incentive or increased what we relied from funding from about just under $800,000 to just over $400,000. And we would have continued that trend the last couple of years if COVID didn't hit. Unfortunately, those numbers did go up, but I'm very proud of our staff that they've been able to keep those to minimal increases over the last 2 years. And we expect this year to kind of pick up right where we were in FY19. Also, through Visit Enid, as Jennifer had mentioned, their budget has stayed the same as it was last year. The difference was when you saw in the extra $75,000 for the transfer, because COVID hit 2 years ago, a lot of events did not happen. So a lot of the funds that Visit Enid would usually put towards those events didn't occur. So that money was never spent. We were able to use it to offset and get lower subsidy from last year, but now with the events happening, that number's back up to the number it was 2 years ago. So while it may look like a $75,000 increase, it's really just a flat number. And that's their breakdown. And then just some opportunities and challenges for the future that we expect to see as soon as this year. Well, conferences and conventions. Unfortunately, when COVID hit, we had about 7 to 10 conferences scheduled. That was when the hotel was going to be open and operational next door. So everyone was very excited to be in there the first year. And with everything canceling, those have now rebooked. But the problem is a lot of these conferences and conventions book 2 to 3 years out. So that business we were going to see in 2020 or 2021 is now really 2023 and 2024. We will pick up a little bit of it in 2022 and I think 1 or 2 in 2021, but a lot of that is in the future. But those events are booked. They are long-term business, and we're going to keep seeing an increase in those as things keep going. Sporting events, we talked about, there's a lot of opportunity in sporting events, and we keep going after that. And there's just more and more that we're working on a regional and national level that we're going after. I think we have some exciting, cool opportunities coming up here in the fall, which we'll talk about more once those become public. Community partnerships, we've really developed some strong partnerships and have been working closely with a lot of entities. Developed a great partnership with David Allen Ballpark, where we're doing some work with them and for them. We operate, as Jennifer mentioned, the snack bar at Meadowlake Golf Course, and work closely with some other entities in town as well, where we continue to develop those community partnerships and help out where we can. One of the challenges we're going to have, which we've seen a lot lately here because of all the events we have coming up, is part-time staffing. As I think every business in town is noticing, and not just in town, but probably across the nation, part-time staffing has been a major challenge. And when it comes to flipping the court, changing rooms like this, it takes a good 6 to 8 people. And sometimes when 2 or 3 are showing up out of those 6 to 8, it makes that job very tough and a very long process. So want to give a lot of credit to our full-time staff because they have stepped up knowing that it has to get done. We are not going to miss an event or cancel an event because we're not getting the staffing. But they've done a great job, but that is going to be a challenge that we're going to see here in the future and already experiencing. COVID-19 recovery, we're still recovering from that. We're not back to where we were each month. We track it and it's getting better, but we still have events that have happened in the past that are currently not happening because of COVID. So we're still recovering from that. And hopefully in the next fiscal year, that'll all be back to normal or as close to normal as possible. And then capital projects is another big thing for us. We're working on some of it now, but the big one that we will see, I believe we are moving forward with it, is the sealing of the exterior of Convention Hall. So if you walk around the facility, you'll see some walls on the interior bubbling. The outside of the building needs to be sealed, prevent any moisture from coming through. So that's a project that needs to be done in FY22. So that'll be a big project that we have coming up here. Any questions for me on the Event Center account?
No, I'd like to make a general comment, though. Really appreciate the way you guys stepped up when we were trying to find ways to handle everything in the community. When COVID came in and it became troublesome to try and get everybody into the chambers over at City Hall. You don't want to have a whole bunch of people standing in a lobby and every other person sitting in a chair to try and do social distancing. You guys stood up and did what you needed to do to help the community, and I appreciate that. Also, all the civic clubs you talked about, Rotary, Ambucks, there's many civic organizations that meet here. So I think this facility has grown to be a very major part of our community, and we appreciate what you've been doing.
Thank you.
Yep.
I'd like to second that as well, Mayor, and emphasize that your staff has done a remarkable job. You've got some wonderful people that work for you that are capable of working in all kinds of different situations, and they just cover it. And I know that's what makes this place successful. And I know that's what's going to make it successful in the future. Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay. Anybody else? Thank you, Kevin.
Now we're moving to Fire Fund on page 136. The same 3 colors of categories. And we're looking at current year. Blue is our adjusted budget for this year, and red is where we have running projection to end the year, and the green would be what we're proposing for next year's budget. So you can see they are very close to similar all the way through. His capital outlay is increased. The blue was a budget appropriation for his additional fire truck. And actually, he got a used one also, and that was done earlier in this fiscal year. He does not have anything like that budgeted for FY22. He just had some smaller equipment items and to redo the north parking lot at his building. But you can see most of the categories are built similar. Personnel is tracking to be just a little bit over. That's mostly in overtime. It's really hard to see that since the numbers are so large on this one, but the red is approximately 105,000 over on personnel. A lot of that is overtime due to when they were covering COVID absences. They were out a lot. Of course, anybody quarantining, but they had, the testing, even if you were out testing, you had to be quarantined, and that was out for several days. So they had to cover a lot. They have a few retirees that happened this year, and also covering that when they're moving up in staff for promotions. So everything else is fairly tracking exactly where we budgeted. And they do have a surplus in next year's budget. They're projected to be approximately $479,000 to start next year and $621,000 in their fund balance to end in FY22.
Are we fully staffed on fire?
They are.
Yeah.
They are fully staffed in the fire department. I think they had a few vacancies, like 2 in the very beginning of the year, but probably halfway through the year, I think is when they went ahead and filled those positions.
Okay. Good question. All right.
If there's no more questions, we can move to the next section.
Okay.
So ready to move on to item 4, Mayor? Is that right, Jennifer?
Yes.
Okay. All right. Item 4, recess to convene as the Enid Municipal Authority. Item number 5, all trustees of the Enid Municipal Authority special meeting are in attendance. Item number 6, Enid Municipal Authority special meeting is now in session. Item 6.1, consider approval of a resolution increasing the 2020-2021 Fiscal Financial Plan for the Enid Municipal Authority in the Enid Municipal Authority Operations Department in the amount of $1 million.
Move to approve.
Second.
Motion and a second. Any discussion? Okay, hearing none, I'll call for the vote.
Commissioner Allen,
Aye.
Commissioner Norwood,
Aye.
Commissioner Siragusa,
Aye.
Commissioner Roberts,
Aye.
Commissioner Stallings,
Aye.
Commissioner Orr,
Aye.
Mayor Pinkinen,
Aye.
motion carries.
Okay, again, 6.1 and 6.2 are the items that we talked about a little bit earlier on the $1 million. Item 6.2, approve the execution of a forbearance agreement entered into by the Osage Nation, the City of Enid, and Enid Municipal Authority, and authorize payment in the amount of $1 million.
Move to approve.
I second.
Motion and a second. Any discussion? Seeing none, I'll call for the vote.
Commissioner Allen,
Aye.
Commissioner Norwood,
Aye.
Commissioner Siragusa,
Aye.
Commissioner Roberts, aye. Commissioner Stallings,
Aye.
Commissioner Orr,
Aye.
Mayor Pinkinen,
Aye.
motion carries.
Okay. Item number 6.3, approval of claims in the amount of $277,770.09.
Move to approve.
Second.
Motion and a second. Discussion? Call for the vote.
Commissioner Allen,
Aye.
Commissioner Norwood,
Aye.
Commissioner Siragusa,
Aye.
Commissioner Roberts, aye. Commissioner Stallings,
Aye.
Commissioner Orr,
Aye.
Mayor Pinkinen,
Aye.
motion carries.
Okay. Item number 6.4, discuss and take necessary action on the fiscal year 2021-2022 Enid Municipal Authority Financial Plan.
Okay, we'll start with our EMA overview. EMA starts on page 152. This is a look at revenues compared to our expense categories. And we do have a deficit of 6.7 million budgeted for next year. Out of our expenses, personnel holds about 7% of our total. Operations, which also includes any transfers out, and that is approximately 64%. Capital is just under 3%, and our debt services is approximately 26% of the total. We had a balanced budget in FY20, but we lowered revenue in FY21 due to COVID unknowns. So we did have a deficit budget last year. And we'll discuss more in detail on the next slides. Revenues are approximately 2.2 million increase. 1.8 of that is due to us increasing sales tax back up to where it was 2 years ago, when we reduced it by 10% last year due to COVID unknowns. The only other thing that is in the revenue as an increase is we increased stormwater just slightly, and that is based on historical averages. And there is money in the miscellaneous reimbursement line for the trash truck buyback. I believe I mentioned that a little bit last Monday. We did have a personnel increase in 3 full-time positions. One of those is temporary, and a small increase budgeted for possible collective bargaining agreements starting July 1. So our operations have increased approximately $7.7 million. 7 of that is the increase in transfers out to fund what we have in our capital improvement program in the draft. 439,000 of that 7.7 is balloon payments that are at the end of the trash truck lease that are in July. And that will also show as a revenue when we do the buyback for the new lease. As we have to do the balloon payments, but they turn around and buy the trucks back from us, and then we start a new lease.
Okay.
Another small increases we have kind of across the board is vehicle maintenance and tools, parts, and supplies for the 2 new positions. So debt decrease is we paid off 3 notes, and one was kind of small, but we'll talk about that on later slides. But that's the decrease in debt. This shows what percentages the totals make up on our EMA revenue. So this is all of our utilities. Water makes up 36%, stormwater is 3%, trash service group is 10%, sewer services 16%, miscellaneous is 3%, and then sales tax is 32%. So when we receive it in the general fund, 1% of that is passed on to EMA for debt and capital projects, and 1% is specifically for CAW. So a total sales tax has made up 32%. That's approximately the same. I believe in FY18, it was at 36% of the total, but since our sales tax has kind of decreased a little bit, we did get to move it back up to 32. It was 30 last year of the total. Here's another slide looking at the EMA revenue comparison based on the numbers. We have no changes other than what I just mentioned. Stormwater's increasing 100,000. 3-year average shows 1.9 million. And our current year running projection, we're showing that we're coming in at 1.94. So we went ahead and increased that. And the other increase is the miscellaneous for the 300,000. That's on the buyback of the leased trucks that switches out in July. Sales tax is the 1.8, so that's 11% increase that we've talked about a few times. So then we look at our expenses. That starts on page 153 and 154. So this is looking at total EMA expenses by category. There are 8 departments in EMA, and we'll look at that on the next slide. Personnel and operations total together. For personnel, I mentioned there's 3 full-time positions, and then a small increase budgeted for collective and bargain agreement. 2 full-time in utility maintenance department and 1 full-time in solid waste. Operations increase, again, I mentioned, is the balloon payments, and we do have some increases in vehicle maintenance. Utility maintenance increased their tools, parts, and supplies to cover their new concrete positions that are budgeted. And we have the other changes by each department on the next slide. Transfers, we have another slide to go over, and also capital outlay and our debt. We have upcoming slides to go over the detail of those. still shows our variance of 6.7 million. So EMA operations and utility services, solid waste services, public utilities management, water production, utility maintenance, wastewater plant management, and capital replacement are 8 departments in EMA. And the operations department is where our transfers out and our debt payment lies. Transfers out increased by approximately 7 million. And the debt payments decreased overall by about 1.7 million we saw on the last slide. We paid off the 3 debts and it decreased a little bit. I'll probably just mention the departments that have the biggest variance. Solid waste, that's the balloon payment, and their vehicle maintenance went up a little bit, and they do have the additional position. It is temporary, but we don't know if that will last a year or 2 years or anything like that. Then we have utility maintenance, and they have 2 new positions for concrete work. And so their tools, parts, and supplies also increased for those new positions. And we do have in the capital replacement a new truck for those concrete positions. Requests are higher in our capital replacement, but priority number 1 is a $290,000 trash truck. So that's hard to kind of cut out after you look at your first purchase is $290,000. But as of right now in the budget, all requests were actually put in the budget as of right now. And we'll look at the details on another slide for that. This slide is looked at on page 160. This will show our transfers out to each of our capital improvement program funds, also the general fund. And we've already talked about the event center and what amount goes to help supplement that. But the rest of them are for our capital improvement. So our changes on this slide are totally based on projects. And as Commissioner Norwood said, remember, Oklahoma is the only state that does not provide property tax for general budget. So that's why that 11.3 million goes back to operate the general fund to help supplement. Stormwater fund is the only one that's based on actual revenues billed. Everything else is based on projects. And the revenue for stormwater increased by 100,000. So that's why we increased the transfer. Here we're looking at equipment. And I don't need to read all of that out, but there were 15 items put in this fiscal year's budget. There are 15 items proposed for FY22. And the landfill solid waste is approximately 668,000 of this 1.7. The AMI, which is our meter readings for utility services, they're slowly replacing infrastructure, but it will start, and you'll see this 600,000 in each budget year for several years to come. We've had 400,000 in the last 2-3 years, but it has increased because we are behind and there's meters that are no longer covered under warranty. So we will have to see that in each year for several years. So the remaining is only 440,000 of that 1.7. Here's our debt, which is, you can see on page 159, the detail. And on the page 159, it does separate the principal and interest. You can see the three that were paid off this fiscal year, and that was the 2000A and the 2012 line of credit and the 2015 capital note were all paid off in FY21. So we have our debt schedule that shows all of these and the payments that have to be made each year on pages 146 to 151. And it shows all of our notes, all of our debt. So debt payments decreased overall by the 1.7 million. We paid off the 3 this year. We decreased our total balance by 10.8 million during this fiscal year in payments, but we added 272 million for our 2020 OWRB call loan. Any questions?
One question, on page 180, the air compressor for 22,000, what is that for? It's the second line item, page 180.
Utility maintenance asked for an air compressor.
That's a huge air compressor.
I can find out and let you know.
It is, prices of everything are skyrocketing, but
I'm sure that it's fairly large. I know that they have the 2 new concrete guys, and I know that we have some concrete trailers also budgeted. So I don't know if it goes in line with that aspect, or if it's actually for their fixing water lines and things like that. I don't know which, but I can find out for you.
While you're at that, or maybe Gerald, I'd like to know how they're picking up the trash containers in the parks. Is one of these vehicles going to be for that, or?
We'll have an answer for you on Thursday, Commissioner, because Everett or Corey can answer that best. We typically have a truck. We do have a truck in the Parks Department that picks up a lot of those cans in the parks, throughout the parks. And so I will just ask them to be here. They'll be here anyway for some capital items, and they can explain that.
Okay, thank you.
I know there's a mini rear load trash truck that is budgeted for this year, but I don't know for sure if that's exactly what you're asking.
Yes.
So
as you're probably aware, in the parks, it's a different shape and a different type of and the vehicle that we used to use to pick those up broke and it wasn't visible any longer. So I noticed we're back in those same containers again. So we must have some special truck that's picking them up. So.
Okay.
any other questions?
Anybody else got anything else?
So Thursday, the agenda will be similar. We'll have every section on. So if you want to discuss anything at that time in each of those sections, that's when you do that. We are planning on tentatively approving the budget, hopefully on May 18th, which is Tuesday, our next regular meeting. So.
All right, that kind of answers 12.1 on the agenda. So item 13, we're adjourned.